Dear students, in this lecture I will discuss about Python numbers and typecasting. There are three numeric types in Python: int, float and complex, which we have already discussed in our last video. We have also discussed that variables of numeric types are created when you assign a value to them. X equal to 1 creates an integer variable x, and if you want to know the data type of the variable x, then you can use the type function. So here you can see it gives you integer. In the same way, you can also define float variable like this, and the data type of the variable y is float. Similarly, you can define complex variables like z equal to 5 plus 6z, and this creates a complex variable. Float can also be in scientific numbers notation. For that, we will use the letter E. Consider this example: x equal to 45 E3, and if you want to know the type of the variable x, then you will get float. It means float can be in scientific numbers notation with an E to indicate the power of 10. Now I will discuss about type conversion, which is known as typecasting in programming languages. You can convert from one type to another in Python also, and this method is known as typecasting. Let us consider an example. Suppose you declared a variable x with the value 5 assigned to it. It means the variable x has the data type int. Now you can typecast this variable x to a float like this. Suppose a equal to float of x. Now the value of a becomes a float instead of an integer. The value of a is now 5.0, and if you now want to know the type of the variable a, it shows you float. Similarly, you can again typecast from float to integer like this. Suppose c equal to int of a, and the value of c becomes 5 now, and if you want to know the type of the variable c, it will show you int. So this technique is known as typecasting in any programming language. You note that you cannot convert complex numbers into another number type. Now I will discuss more about type conversion or typecasting in Python. There are two types of type conversion: implicit type conversion and explicit type conversion. Now let us consider an example. Suppose we have two variables x, and the value assigned to it is an integer number 1, 2, 3. And we have another variable, and the value assigned to it is a float, say 5.56. And suppose we want to add these two numbers and assign the result into another variable, say z. So for this we need to write down z equal to x plus y. Now if you print the value of z, it will give you the number 128.56, which is a float. As you can see here, type of z will give you float. So this is implicit typecasting in Python. Here you can see when you add an integer number with a float number, the resultant will be in float. Now consider another example. Suppose x is a variable which contains an integer number 1, 2, 3, and s is a variable which is a string variable, and suppose the value is hello. And if you want to add these two variables x and s, then you will get an error because it is not possible to add an integer variable with a string variable. If you want to really add these two variables, then you need to convert the integer variable into a string variable. So for that you need to write down like this: string of x str x plus s, and this will concatenate the two strings, because here the variable x is now converted into a string. Now 1, 2, 3 does not denote an integer number, it now denotes a string. So 1, 2, 3 is a string and hello is also a string, and these two concatenates with each other using the plus sign. This kind of typecasting in Python is known as explicit conversion, because here you need to convert the variable x from integer to string before you can add or you can concatenate it with another string variable s. Before the end of this video lecture, I would like to discuss about print function in Python. So print is a function in Python. Consider x is a variable and the value assigned to it is 10. To print the value of x, we can write the code like this: print of x will give you the value assigned to the variable x, and here you can see 10 is printed. Now one important thing that I would like to mention here is that since I am using JupyterLab, in JupyterLab we don't need to write down the print function. You may write down, as I have written here, to print the value of a variable. But in JupyterLab, if you just mention the name of the variable, it will also show you the value of the variable. So here you can see the value of the variable x is 10. So in JupyterLab, you don't need to explicitly write down the print function to print the value of a variable. And in the following lectures, I will print the value of a variable like this without using the print function. This is the end of this video lecture. Please subscribe my channel, like the video and share.